She said the name the way you say something you have been saving. Not loudly, not for effect. She just said it plainly. The way you put something down that you have been carrying in both hands for a long time and are finally ready to set on the table. And Simon Cowell, who had heard 10,000 names on 10,000 stages, said, very quietly, "I know that name." And then he didn't say anything else. For a long time, he didn't say anything else at all. Another Tuesday night taping. The Pasadena Civic Auditorium, 3,000 people filling every seat. Cameras rolling, lights blazing, millions watching from home. Another hopeful contestant stepping into the spotlight. Another story waiting to begin. Another ordinary night on America's Got Talent, until it wasn't. Simon sat at the judge's table in his black shirt, arms crossed, that familiar expression of careful skepticism in its usual place. Howie Mondale was leaning back in his chair. Heidi Klum had her chin tilted toward the stage. Sofia Vergara was writing something on the notepad in front of her. The audience settled and hummed. Another audition, another Tuesday, another beginning. The woman who walked out was 79 years old. She moved without hurrying, the particular steadiness of someone for whom dignity had long since become automatic. Not performed, not effortful. Just the natural carriage of a person who has decided the world gets what it gets, and she will not be rushed on its account. Her name was Loretta Pace. She was from Clarksdale, Mississippi. She wore a dusty rose dress with a pearl brooch at the collar that had belonged to her mother. She carried nothing. She had decided she did not need anything she hadn't already brought with her. Terry Crews met her with a wide, careful smile, the one he used when he sensed he was in the presence of someone who would not appreciate being talked to like a curiosity. "Good evening. Who do we have?" "Loretta Pace," she said. A voice like river clay, low and warm. "Loretta Pace. And where are you from?" "Clarksdale, Mississippi. Born there. Still there." "How old are you, Loretta?" 79. The audience applauded. Simon watched her without expression. Heidi smiled. "What are you going to do for us tonight, Loretta?" She thought for a moment. "Sing a hymn," she said. "One I've been singing for 11 years. Every Sunday. With one other person." She stopped. "I want to say that person's name first, before I do anything else. Because she's watching from home and I want her to hear it in a place this big." Terry's voice gentled. "Who are you singing for tonight, Loretta?" Loretta Pace looked at the judge's table, not at the full panel. At Simon. She had watched the show for years. She knew which one had built it. "My husband Walter passed 11 years ago," she said. "Heart attack. Fast, no warning." She said it without flinching, the way you say a thing after 11 years, not without feeling, but without the feeling undoing you. "I was 68 years old. We had 44 years together. And then one morning I was alone, and I didn't know how to be." The audience made that sound, the one that rises from a crowd when everyone feels the same thing at once. The woman who kept me from disappearing was a nurse named Patricia Okafor. She worked at the clinic where Walter died. She had no reason to stay in my life after that. No official reason. No assignment. She just stayed. Loretta folded her hands in front of her. She drove me to my appointments for 3 years. She called me every Sunday. She sat with me when the house got too quiet. She taught me that surviving is not the same as living, and she made me learn the difference. A breath. I need to say her name somewhere it can be heard properly. Patricia Okafor. That's who kept me safe. Simon unfolded his arms. Not quickly. Slowly, the way something loosens when a word hits a place it wasn't expected. He leaned forward. What did you say her name was? Loretta looked at him. Patricia Okafor. Simon was quiet for a moment. The entire room was quiet with him. Then he said it again, half to himself, half to the room. I know that name. Howie Mandel turned to look at Simon. Heidi Klum looked at Simon. Sofa Vergara set down her pen. The audience felt the shift, the way audiences do, and held itself still. Loretta tilted her head. I expect you might, she said. She mentioned once she did some work for your production. She didn't make much of it. Simon looked at Loretta Pace for a long moment. He had nothing to say. And Simon Cowell, who had never in 15 seasons been at a loss for what to say next, couldn't speak a single word. To understand what happened in that room, you need to understand what happened 11 years before it. The year was 2014. Walter Pace was 70 years old and had been retired from teaching 7th grade mathematics for 3 years, and he was, by every account, enjoying it. He gardened, he read. He drove Loretta to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings and carried the basket and complained cheerfully about the heat. He was a tall, unhurried man. 40 years explaining things carefully to children. He had never quite stopped applying that patience to the rest of his life. He was kind in the unshowy way of people who are kind, because it is simply the thing they are. He died on a Thursday in April. A heart attack, sudden and total, in the kitchen at 7 in the morning while the coffee was still brewing. Loretta was in the next room. By the time she reached him, it was already over. The clinic in Clarksdale was small. Patricia Okafor had worked there for 6 years by then. She was 41 years old. A registered nurse, originally from Enugu, Nigeria, who had come to Mississippi for a residency program and stayed. The Delta needed nurses. She had learned that need is a legitimate reason to remain somewhere. She was precise and unhurried and deeply good at her work, which she understood to include more than the purely medical. She had sat with families in bad moments before. She knew how to be in a room where grief had just arrived. She sat with Loretta for 2 hours after Walter was gone. She did not fill the silence with noise. She made tea. She called Loretta's daughter in Memphis. She stayed until the daughter arrived, and then she went back to the clinic and finished her shift. She came back the next week. No particular reason. She brought a covered dish from her own kitchen. Jollof rice. It was what she made when she wanted to say something that words were not adequate for. She sat at Loretta's kitchen table for an hour. She came back the week after that. There was no protocol for this. It was not a program, not a service, not a reimbursable activity. It was one woman deciding that another woman should not be alone in the way Loretta was alone, and acting on that decision with the same quiet consistency she brought to everything else. She drove Loretta to her cardiologist in Memphis when Loretta's own driving became less reliable. She sat in the waiting room and asked the right questions afterward. She called every Sunday at 11 in the morning, and they talked for however long the talking went. They started singing together on those calls. Old hymns, the ones Loretta had grown up with in the Clarksdale church where her mother had played piano. Patricia did not share Loretta's faith exactly, but she shared the songs. She had her own inheritance of music that meant more than it explained. And she understood that singing together is one of the oldest ways human beings have of saying, "We are still here. The world has not finished with us yet." They sang "His Eye is on the Sparrow" every week for 2 years. Patricia Okafor worked location shoots for Simon Cowell's production company when it traveled through the South. Part-time, contracted through a medical staffing firm. She had done 6 shoots over 4 years. Simon had met her twice, both times on set in Louisiana, both times briefly, both times in the context of someone on the crew needing attention. He knew her name the way you know the names of people who are very good at what they do and very quiet about it. He knew it and had not thought about it since. He thought about it now. He thought about the fact that a woman he employed, loosely, contractually, at a distance, had been driving a widow to her cardiologist in Mississippi, calling her every Sunday. For 11 years, not because Simon asked her to, not because anyone asked her to. Patricia Okafor had looked at a woman in a difficult hour and decided the hour did not have to be as difficult as it was. She was in a position to help. So she helped. The way people do when they are paying attention and have decided that paying attention obligates them. He had never known. She had never mentioned it. It had simply been happening, quietly, in the background of a life he was too busy to look at closely. He thought that was the hardest part. Until tonight. Now Simon Cowell sat at the judge's table in the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. Loretta Pace was standing 20 feet away in her dusty rose dress, her mother's pearl brooch at her collar. He had just said, "I know that name." And then, run out of words entirely. Howie Mandel was watching him. Heidi Klum had both hands folded on the table. Sofia Vergara was very still. Terry Crews stood at the side of the stage without moving, because the room had arrived somewhere that required stillness. Simon looked at Loretta. He pressed his lips together. He looked at the table. He looked back at her. She never said a word, he said. Not accusatory. Not surprised exactly. Just the plain fact of it, spoken aloud. "No," Loretta said. She wouldn't. If this story reached you, share it. Subscribe so you never miss moments like these. Simon looked at Loretta for a long moment. Then he did the thing that no one in that building was expecting. He said, "Will you sing it? The one you sing with her?" Loretta's chin lifted slightly. "Every Sunday," she said. "Then, sing it," Simon said. The pianist found the key. Loretta Pace stood at the center of the stage, 79 years old, from Clarksdale, Mississippi, in her mother's brooch. And she sang. She sang His Eye is on the Sparrow. She sang it the way it is meant to be sung, not as a performance, but as a report, as evidence, as the simple statement of a woman who has been through something real and come out the other side still standing, still singing, still here. Her voice was not young. It was better than young. It was the voice of someone who has had cause to mean every syllable, and does. She sang to the 3,000 people in the room. She sang to the cameras. She sang to Patricia Okafor watching from home in Clarksdale, in the house where she had carried jollof rice 11 years ago and sat at a table and decided not to leave. The last note hung in the air of the auditorium. Then it was gone. Then 3,000 people stood up. Heidi Klum was crying, openly, not trying to manage it. Howie Mandel was on his feet with his hands pressed together. Sofia Vergara had both hands over her mouth and tears running down her face. Terry Crews stood at the edge of the stage and looked at Loretta Pace. The way you look at something that has just demonstrated what a human being is capable of on an ordinary Tuesday. Simon Cowell pressed the golden buzzer. Gold paper fell. Loretta stood in the center of it. She looked up at the gold paper falling in great sheets. At a building this size. At all of it. Then she smiled. The smile of someone who was not expecting joy and got it anyway and is decent enough to receive it graciously. Her daughter, who was in the audience, walked onto the stage. She took her mother's hands. 2 days after the episode aired, Simon called Patricia Okafor's mobile number. She answered on the third ring. He introduced himself. She said she knew who he was. He said, I didn't know about Loretta, about any of it. All these years, Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You weren't supposed to know. That wasn't the job." Simon said, "Is there anything you need? Anything I can do?" Patricia thought. "Loretta's roof needs looking at before the rain season," she said. "There's a soft spot over the back bedroom." Simon had it inspected and repaired by the end of the week. Patricia Okafor still calls Loretta Pace every Sunday at 11 in the morning. They still sing. The calls last for however long the talking goes. Loretta's daughter, who heard the story in full for the first time on that stage in Pasadena, has started joining the call from Memphis when she can. 3 voices now, most Sundays. The pearl brook is back in its box on Loretta's dresser. She only brings it out for occasions that deserve it. She has decided that more occasions deserve it than she used to think. There are women in this world who make it their business to show up. Not because they are compensated, not because anyone is watching, not because the work will be recognized or remembered in any official place. They show up because someone needs them to. And they have looked at that need and decided it is sufficient reason. Patricia Okafor is one of those women. Loretta Pace sang her name in a room that held 3,000 people, and it went out to millions more. For one Sunday, it was heard the way it deserved to be heard all along.